Hey guys, it's Chad from the Teach Better team, and I'm here with the amazing, the wonderful Tiffany Ott to
I
do
like these
our coach
adjectives.
chat live. It was a great chat, wasn't it tonight,
It
Tiffany?
was a great chat. Although, when was the last time I said it was a terrible chat? I don't think I ever have. But
Yeah, that's true. So maybe we're a
our
little bit
chats are always
biased,
awesome.
but maybe tonight was a little bit extra awesome.
It was really good. I mean, it was a topic that is, um, it's been on my mind lately. We published the social emotional learning course
Right.
couple months ago, and it has a lot connected to classroom culture, which was our topic tonight. And there's a lot of overlap there. So it's been something I've been really interested in. And so I enjoyed hearing some different perspectives and kind of talking through classroom culture with a bunch of other people today. So it was a really good mastery chat. I liked
Yeah,
it.
I really enjoyed it. I loved hearing people's perspectives on what culture is and what's
Mm-hmm.
important to them. I definitely think there were some connected strands though with the discussion, right? Like students feeling trusted and
Mm-hmm.
respected. I definitely felt that as a common strand.
Right.
One thing that we talk about a lot is not being afraid to fail, being okay to struggle. Like that's a huge culture piece that we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking with Emily in the pre-chat, and another huge piece is like just consistency, right? So like
Oh, yeah.
culture is this thing that we like to talk about, and I think this resonated throughout the chat. But like without action, without consistency, without actually living it every single day,
Yeah.
it's really hard to build that culture. It's more than a poster on the wall or 5 minutes at the beginning of the year.
Right. Well, and that's something that the very last question I really liked. What was the very last question? I can't remember off the top of my head. What are you going to do next year at the start of the year to kind of build this classroom culture? And I liked that question, although I don't think I really answered it the way it was intended. But I'm always personally really great at the first week, the first 2 weeks, the first couple months. Like I got it right. And I'm sure other educators out there can empathize with this. It's really hard to continue focusing on and building that culture come April and May when you are absolutely exhausted. And so my goal for next year in terms of culture is I want to come up with some systems or routines that are going to help remind me. Like maybe I have something pop up in Google Calendar and I schedule them, over the
Yeah,
summer that says, hey, Tiffany, that classroom culture you worked so hard to build in the first couple of weeks. Let's remember that and come back to that and kind
sure.
of take a status check of where we are, because I think in my 10 years of teaching, I've gotten pretty good at establishing a culture,
Yeah.
but I can always improve. And I think one of the areas that I can really improve is in consistently continuing it throughout the school year. So that was a big like takeaway for me.
Yeah, something Emily kind of came through pretty strong on, and that I completely agree with, is that like keeping it simple can help that, right? So
Yeah.
having like these pillars or these few things that you
Right.
have in your classroom, whether it's, hey, be nice to each other, be kind, period, end of
Right.
story, like
Right.
that's going to be a pillar. Or trust that I have your best interest in mind, and I'll trust that you have good intentions, right? Like, so we're going to have
Yeah.
this mutual agreement. So like, in this, we talk
Almost
about,
like a contract, like a
yeah.
reciprocal contract, right?
And we talk about this with teachers all the time in terms of like implementing mastery learning or any other
Right.
initiative. Like if it's too complicated, you're going to stop doing it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so if you have 47 pillars of the culture of a classroom, like chances are you're going to drop a few. If
Right.
you have five, it's really easy to just harp and hone and just build those pillars
Right.
up so that you can build the rest of your class on top of it. So,
Right. Right.
um, and I think a lot of people had those, and I think that's why I liked the three things question. Like, how would you define your?
Yeah, that was a fun one.
And I liked the different variety of answers that we got, and I think
Yeah.
we were able to see a lot of different varieties. But like from me looking at them, I kind of resonated. There were a lot of synonyms in there for things like trust, caring,
Yeah.
kindness. A big one for me is always ownership, right?
Yeah.
So like, who
Yeah.
has control, who has ownership. Um, but it was definitely nice to see that. Is there anything else that stuck out with you kind of throughout the chat that
Yeah, so I'm trying to hunt. There were a couple things on that the 3 words question that I remember stood out to me, and I of course can't remember exactly what they were because I didn't screenshot them like I sometimes do, which is so smart, but I didn't. And of course now my screen's not loading. So
what was the gist? What was the gist of the post?
you know, I don't know. I'll come back to that when my screen loads, and I'll come back to that. But I want to talk about something else because I can, and I have remembered what that thing was. So I really liked question 5 also. And if anybody is like missed the chat, wants to go back and kind of find highlights, question 5 was, who are the experts that you look to help you learn how to build a classroom culture? And like, who do you refer to when you need to further investigate? And so there are tons and tons and tons of educators and leaders and books that people shared that I'd like to kind of go through again myself and kind of curate that and say, okay, who is it that I'm not following that I should be following? What should I read that I haven't read? So that's a question that if you missed the chat, go back to question 5, scroll through until you find it. And that's one that you definitely need to focus on. So what did Candace say? Candace said something I do. Go ahead, Chad. You want to read it?
Yeah, no. So she does this really cool sticky note thing, right? So she just walks around with sticky notes. And if a student's having a bad day, she just puts a little positive note, on their desk, right? It's amazing to me how much these little things go a long way.
Yeah.
Honestly, they go a long way with staff members too. Right?
Oh,
so like not only is culture important in a classroom, it's also important in a grade level, in a building, and in a district. So like if you're having a bad day, it might only take that one. I'm going to steal Jeff Kubiak's word and sort of mantra here for a minute. That one drop of kindness to create those ripples of kindness and those good feelings and those good vibes. Because I can tell you, like personally, we did something like that with my staff. And when I would get one of those notes, I would be 10 times more likely to write 2, 3, or 4 notes to someone else. Because when good things happen to you, when kindness happens to you, when positivity happens to you, you become a vessel for that positivity. Because you can't, so they always have that saying, like, you can't pour from an empty vessel, right?
Right.
So that fills up your vessel, that you can pour those into other people's vessels. You can spread that, but until you're built up with that positivity, you can then share that with other people. But it's the same with our students. I guarantee you, the students that she puts those notes on are more likely to do something kind or positive after that note, compared to something negative or something not kind or unkind.
Well, absolutely. And there were several times during the chat, especially early on when it was defining classroom culture. And I remember thinking to myself, and I think I tweeted it, fingers flying. I don't remember everything I tweeted, but about how classroom culture and building culture are closely connected, and they don't have to be the same, but they influence each other. So like if, let's say, I don't know about you, Chad, but I've been in buildings where the building culture was not fabulous.
Sure.
It was really negative. It was really down, and I
could have been better.
What's that? It could have been better. There you go. That's a nicer way to put it. But it was a struggle, trying to maintain this positive classroom atmosphere in my own room, and then I felt it every time I stepped out of my room. My students felt it every time they stepped out of my room, and it's just like if they're in opposition to each other, it can be really challenging. So it's not impossible to build a really phenomenal classroom culture or when you have like a not so phenomenal building culture, but it is a little bit harder. And so that's when you go places like your network on Twitter, or you connect with us and say, I need a breath of positivity. I need something to get me through this negativity so that I can bring the positivity to my students. And you start kind of building it that way. And, we talk all the time about the idea of a slow diffusion model and the fact that, sometimes it starts with like a teacher doing something different, doing something hard and important and amazing for kids. And they're going to be battling uphill for a while. And eventually you start to pull others in, and it takes a long time. And that's where, those single teachers trying to make a really big difference, that's when you got to reach out to us, because it's hard to do it alone. And so that's why you have a crew here who are a team who's ready to help you get through those really hard times.
We got their back. We have them for sure. And I love the point you made about, like, just because there's a negative culture in a building or a grade level or a district, doesn't mean your students have to feel that.
Yeah.
We talk. I talk a lot about this in the book that may or may not be coming out, around September.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, August, September.
Just a little thing.
So we do have a book thing, but
slide it on.
But seriously though, like, there were times when I was a teacher that, like, I'd come from a meeting that would make me really angry, or I'd come from a collaboration session or a teacher meeting or a meeting with the principal or like a district meeting or something like that, right? And you come into your classroom with all this negativity or that bad culture like seeping in. And then all of a sudden, I legitimately remember the moment when I was like, wait a second. Like, I started class with a crappy attitude and started to build a bad culture in my room because I was feeling negative.
Yeah.
And I stopped for a second and I said, there is not a single person in this classroom that gives two craps about the meeting I just had or is even aware of the meeting I just had. So it is completely unethical and unfair, I would say, to let that seep into my classroom. And that really helped me kind of envision, like, so I can control this classroom. I may not be able to control the whole building, but I can control this classroom. And put anything other than positivity into this environment is going to negatively affect the culture. So that's something, like, whether it's take 3 breaths before that bell rings, or positively greet your students at the door and smile at them and rejuvenate yourself. Because I'm going to be honest with you, you're having a crappy day. The best thing you can do to help the culture and the feeling that you're having is joke around with your students. Like, make them laugh with them, say hello, do that weird high five or give one of them a hug, like whatever it is. Those are those moments that will literally like fill you back up and be like, it's okay, we have this, it's going to be all right. But if your culture is not already there, it becomes really hard to not let that negativity seep into your room. So I almost think of like the culture of a classroom is almost like a fortress that protects that positivity against all the other crap we have to deal with as teachers, right? If that's not strong enough, it's gonna seep in.
Yeah, my mother is very wise, and she should know that I think she's an incredibly intelligent woman, and she had been trying to teach me for pretty much my entire life this concept and this idea that you can not change what happens to you in your life. You can't change the things that happen around you. You can't change the teacher down the hall making a snarky comment during a team meeting. You can't change any of that. The only thing you can change is how you respond and react to the situation. And so it took me like 9 years of my career to actually let that sink in for some reason. But in the last couple of years, I've really found some freedom in, being able to say all of the negativity around me, because I don't care what school you're in, there's going to be some level of negativity. All of that, I can't change that immediately. What I can change is how I react to it. And by changing how I react to it, it's going to change it in the long run. And so that kind of like even just shifting my mental perspective on it has made such a big difference for my own mental well-being and for my students in the classroom, because they don't have to know that things are absolutely insane in the staff meeting that we just had. That's not going to help our culture. And by me modeling the fact that things happen and we deal with it and we change how we react, and that's it. Like, that is so powerful for our students for us to attempt to teach our students that lesson.
Yeah, so I've been putting up a few awesome comments because the chat comments are just coming in. So I want to thank, Mary Ellen was talking about Disney. Candace Miller was doing some amazing things, like reflecting on her building experiences. Jennifer Mann just said that her district's doing an E plus R equals O, which is, event, response, and outcome.
Oh,
And
yeah.
whether you're talking about staff or students or anything, like this is a really good way to really simplify things, right?
Yeah.
So an event happens, you can either control it or you can't control it. Most of the time an event happens, you can't control it because it's already happened. It's
Yeah.
done. So worrying about the event, I always have the phrase like, I want to be with people who want to put out the fire, not the people who want to argue about why the fire started. Okay.
Yeah.
So, let's put out the fire. So the event has already happened. The response is an important thing that if you don't think about can make the event extrapolate or become worse. Or you can change it into a positive based on how you react to that event, which then obviously dictates the outcome of the event. So I think it's a really cool tool. Some people might think that's a little bit corny, right? Like that's one of those things like, oh, E plus R equals O, like I'm sure that's going to change a lot of people's lives. But with all the initiatives that we have to bring to schools, right, and districts, we are 100% aware that, like, even if it seems corny, even if it seems simple, a lot of times those things have a great impact if done with fidelity and if done correctly, right? So if you buy into that, it's going to work better than if you're like, I'm going to have a bad response to the event of being given this initiative. Therefore, the outcome is going to be poor.
Right. No, absolutely. And helping our students see that pattern and that cycle. I love that E plus R equals O, because to me, like, yes, that's a tool that I can use as an educator for myself or for my colleagues, but it's such a huge tool for our students, acknowledging, hey, I get your response. Let's talk about the response and let's deal with it and cope with it. And, another thing that kind of struck me during this conversation on classroom culture is just how broad of a topic classroom culture is, Chad, because I mean, there are so many pieces and parts in terms of social emotional learning that we already talked about, classroom management, communication, teaching our students how to communicate and how to express their emotions. It is such a complex thing, even getting into how you grade, how you assess. And Emily brought up feedback. I think it was in question 6, and the role of feedback in a classroom culture. And it is such a huge topic. And I think that's one reason why some of us kind of struggle to define classroom culture.
True.
Because it is so big, right?
Yeah. And I like that point too, because I think if we don't define a culture will define itself.
Oh, right? Absolutely.
So like a culture is going to happen in your classroom. Right. There's nothing you can do about that. It happening, right? It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But what you can do is do a lot of things to positively contribute to that culture. Now, I like that you talked about like all these different factors, right? Because, for example, if I build great relationships with students, but my assessment practices are super strict and not conducive to growth mindset, like those are going to fight against each other, right? Even though my students like me, if I'm not giving them the opportunity to grow, like that's going to have a negative impact on my culture. Or if I greet students at the door every single day, but I'm super strict with management and fighting every single battle in my classroom, those two things are going to fight with each other. Or let's even talk about like instructional style, right?
Yeah.
If I don't feel like you care about what I actually care about and you're talking to me for 60 minutes every day, that's going to negatively impact, regardless of how nice I think you are as a teacher, regardless of how kind you are or how kind we are to each other, the culture in that classroom is going to be different. So I absolutely agree that it's this multifaceted thing, but I'm really glad that Emily was able to sort of hone in on some of these things tonight in the Mastery Chat and really kind of hash those things out. So
I have one more thought before we go, because I know that we've been gabbing for a little while and I really, really want to get this out because it's super important.
Take us there.
So another thing, how I mentioned question 5 has a lot of people posting some phenomenal resources and experts that they go to for help and advice. Another thing that I saw often with that question, and I just loved it and I kicked myself for not thinking it before I actually answered the question, was the expert they go to is their students.
Wow.
They talk to their kids, talk to your students. If you feel like the culture is lacking something, or heck, if you feel like it's great, but you asked your students and they feel like it's lacking something, you've got to have the conversations with your students, and you have to make them feel heard. You have to help them see that you really are hearing them. And so I loved how many people I saw saying the expert they go to work on their classroom culture is their students.
Absolutely.
And that was really cool for me. And I was jealous I didn't think of it first.
Yeah, they're the other stakeholder, right? like
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's a great way to close this out. I think if there's one takeaway that they have, I think it's Tiffany Ott's final statement on the post chat live. So Tiffany, I would love if in the next like 10 seconds, you would revisit that thought, remind everybody of that thought, and say goodnight to all of the amazing people that are joined us right now in the chat and that participating tonight.
I will do my best. Okay, so the number one expert, the number one thing you need to do when you are talking about building a positive classroom culture, you could read a ton of books, you could follow a ton of people, and that's all great, and do that. But don't forget to involve your students. Number one expert on the classroom culture in your room, in your building, are the kids sitting in the chairs every day. So make sure you include them in the conversation. Is that good?
That was awesome.
Summarize it great.
I got like a lump in my throat. I was like tearing up a little bit.
You're
So,
all right, guys.
And on that note, I'm going to wave my white flag, all right, and surrender to the end of this post chat live. So, Tiffany, as always, thank you. You are amazing. Have an amazing night. And everyone else, have an amazing night. Thanks for showing up here on Mastery Chat, and thanks for the awesome comments. So, have a great night. Stay awesome, and always teach better.
See you guys later next week.